Welcome back to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we are opening up what you could call the ultimate communications manual for the human body.
Yeah, we're diving into the hidden chemical conversations that regulate, well, pretty much everything.
Everything from your sleep schedule to your metabolism, we are talking about the endocrine system.
And to really grasp its dramatic power, I think we have to start with one of the most uh, chemically driven creatures on the planet,
Which would be?
the male elephant seal.
Ah, of course.
Like,
I mean, you look at these animals, and the difference between the male and the female is just
It's staggering, isn't it?
staggering. The males are giants. They have this massive fleshy nose.
The proboscis.
The proboscis, right. And they spend their mating season just, fighting and roaring constantly. They are a monument to aggressive masculinity.
They absolutely are. And that massive size difference, the development of that huge nose, even the aggression, it all boils down to one single molecule.
Testosterone. It's the perfect definition of a hormone, a secreted signal molecule that circulates throughout the body and stimulates specific target cells.
So our mission today is to understand how that one molecule can drive such enormous changes. But, if hormones flood the entire body, what determines which cell actually listens to the signal?
That is the core question, and there are really three essential variables.
Okay.
First, you have the concentration of the hormone. Obviously, the elephant seal bulls have very high levels of testosterone.
Makes sense.
Second, the target cell has to have the specific receptor for that hormone. No receptor, no response. It's like the signal is just ignored.
And the third one, this one feels the most subtle, but maybe the most important.
I think it is. It's the cell's unique response to the hormone binding.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think about the elephant seal again. That same high level of testosterone causes cell growth in the nose tissue, making the proboscis grow larger.
Right.
But in the testes, that exact same molecule triggers sperm production. So same hormone, same concentration, but the internal machinery of the target cell dictates a totally different result.
Exactly.
So we've established that hormones travel long distances through the bloodstream, what we call endocrine signaling.
Right?
But that's not the only way cells chat, is it? What about short-range communication?
Oh, cells are constantly talking locally, too. We have two main types of local regulators.
Okay.
There's paracrine signaling, which is when a molecule diffuses to target cells right next door. It's kind of like passing a note to your neighbor in class.
And the other?
The other is autocrine signaling, where the cell actually talks to itself. It secretes a molecule that then triggers a response in that very same cell.
And some of these short-distance signals are really surprising, like prostaglandins.
Yeah, those are modified fatty acids involved in inflammation.
Yeah.
If you take an aspirin, what you're actually doing is blocking their synthesis.
But I think the most fascinating local regulator has to be nitric oxide, or NO.
Which is just a gas.
Just a gas. And it causes blood vessels to dilate vasodilation, which locally increases blood flow.
And that NO connection is such a powerful example of, real-world application. Its ability to cause vasodilation is critical. And drugs like Viagra work precisely by prolonging the activity of that specific nitric oxide pathway.
So beyond local regulators, this whole chemical network links directly to the nervous system.
It does.
We already know about synaptic signaling, where neurotransmitters cross tiny gaps. But tell us about neuroendocrine signaling.
That's a really cool hybrid. It happens when specialized nerve cells, we call them neurosecretory cells, decide to use the bloodstream as their communication highway.
So they're nerves, but they're acting like glands.
Exactly. They secrete things called neurohormones, like antidiuretic hormone or ADH, directly into the blood. This lets the signal travel a long distance and affect targets far away.
And we can't forget the signals that leave the body entirely.
Ah, yes. Pheromones.
Oh.
These are released into the external environment for communication between members of the same species. You see everywhere, in nature ants marking trails, or a female moth attracting a male from, kilometers away.
An incredible reach. Okay, now that we know where the signals go, let's look at what they're actually made of, chemically speaking, because this is the fundamental distinction for how they work.
It really is. We have three major chemical classes. First, polypeptides, like insulin. These are essentially proteins.
Okay.
Then you have the amines, like epinephrine, adrenaline, and thyroxine. They're derived from a single amino acid.
And the third group.
The steroids, like cortisol, which are lipids derived from cholesterol.
And the key chemical distinction that dictates everything that follows is solubility.
Correct. You have water-soluble versus lipid-soluble. The polypeptides in most amines are water-soluble.
So they travel easily in the blood.
Beautifully.
Yeah.
But they cannot cross the lipid plasma membrane of a cell.
They get stuck at the door.
Exactly. Whereas the steroids and a few amines, like thyroxine, are lipid-soluble.
Yeah.
They need carrier proteins to move through the blood, but once they reach a target cell, they can pass right through the membrane.
Okay, so let's follow a water-soluble hormone, like epinephrine. If it can't get inside the cell, it must need some kind of intermediary system.
It does. This is called signal transduction.
So what happens?
The hormone binds to a cell surface receptor, often a G protein-coupled receptor. And this is just the first small action.
Tiny knock on the door.
A tiny knock. That binding starts a chain reaction, or cascade, inside the cell, often involving a short-lived internal signal called a second messenger.
And in the epinephrine example, that messenger is cyclic AMP, or CAN-MP.
Correct. And this internal cascade then activates other enzymes like protein kinase A, which leads to the eventual massive response.
Which, in liver cells, means breaking down stored glycogen and releasing glucose for energy.
And the power here is something called signal amplification. You can think of it as a tiny whisper at the cell surface that turns into a billion decibel scream inside.
A billion decibel scream. I like that.
Because each enzyme in that cascade can catalyze thousands of reactions. One single epinephrine molecule binding to that receptor can potentially trigger the cleavage of a billion stored glycogen molecules.
Wow.
That's why the fight-or-flight response is so instantaneous and total.
That is just incredible efficiency. Now, let's compare that to the lipid-soluble steroids. They don't need that whole complex external setup.
No, they get the VIP pass. They just diffuse straight across the plasma membrane and bind to a receptor that's already waiting for them inside.
In the cytoplasm or even the nucleus itself.
Right. And this new hormone receptor complex then travels directly to the DNA, and it acts as a regulator of gene expression. It literally turns specific genes on or off.
So if a lipid-soluble hormone goes straight to the DNA, what's a good example of that in action?
Take estradiol, a steroid hormone. When it binds to receptors in a bird or a frog liver cell, that complex activates a gene called vitellogenin.
And what does that do?
It's the gene necessary for producing egg yolk protein. So it's a very direct genetic route to changing the cell's entire outline.
So those are the mechanisms. Before we move on, let's quickly define the organs that are doing all the secreting.
Good idea.
We have endocrine glands, like the thyroid or gonads. They're ductless and secrete directly into the fluid surrounding the cells, which then enters the bloodstream.
And that's in contrast to exocrine glands, like your salivary glands, which use ducts to deliver their product.
Exactly. Okay, let's move to regulation. The body is all about maintaining balance, or homeostasis, through these pathways and feedback loops.
Right.
Give us the secrete example for a simple endocrine pathway.
Okay, this one is all about digestion. When acidic food, the chyme, enters your small intestine, that low pH is the stimulus,
Trigger.
the trigger. Endocrine cells in the intestine respond by secreting the hormone secretin. Secretin travels through the blood to the pancreas, which then releases bicarbonate.
Which neutralizes the acid.
And that's the response.
And since the response neutralizing the acid shuts off the initial stimulus, that's a perfect example of negative feedback.
It is. It brings the system right back to baseline.
Now, contrast that with the simple neuroendocrine pathway involving oxytocin.
A completely different model. When an infant suckles, sensory neurons fire and stimulate neurosecretory cells in the brain. They release the neurohormone oxytocin.
Which causes milk release.
But the milk release encourages more suckling, which releases more oxytocin.
So that reinforcement is positive feedback. It drives the process forward.
Right. It amplifies it until the condition, the baby being full, changes.
And all of this regulation is coordinated by the command center in the brain.
The hypothalamus.
Right. It integrates nervous system input, like even the sound of a baby crying, and kicks off these neuroendocrine signals.
And that signal typically travels to the pituitary gland, which sits right below the hypothalamus. It's crucial to remember this gland has two very distinct parts.
Let's break that down.
The posterior pituitary is essentially an extension of neural tissue. It doesn't make its own hormones.
So it's just a storage unit?
Pretty much. It only stores and releases neurohormones that were made in the hypothalamus, like ADH, which is for water retention, and oxytocin.
And then there's the anterior pituitary.
Which is a true endocrine gland. It synthesizes its own hormones, but its release is entirely governed by releasing and inhibiting hormones sent down from the hypothalamus.
And this is where we get the really complex cascade pathways.
Exactly. The anterior pituitary releases what we call tropic hormones, or tropins. These are hormones like TSH, thyroid-stimulating hormone, that target other endocrine glands, forcing them to secrete their own hormones.
It creates a multi-step chain of command.
Precisely.
So let's walk through the textbook example of this cascade, thyroid regulation.
Okay, so if your thyroid hormone levels, T3 and T4, drop too low, the hypothalamus detects this. It releases a hormone called TRH.
Which travels to the anterior pituitary.
Right. The pituitary then releases TSH. TSH travels all the way to the thyroid gland, stimulating it to secrete more T3 and T4, which raises your metabolic rate.
And crucially, those final T3 and T4 hormones then exert strong negative feedback on both the hypothalamus and the pituitary to shut the whole system down.
A self-regulating loop.
And when this cascade fails, we get the classic disorder, goiter.
Absolutely. If you lack iodine, which is necessary to manufacture T3 and T4, the thyroid can't produce enough of those final hormones.
So the negative feedback signal never arrives.
It never arrives. So the anterior pituitary just keeps pumping out TSH, trying to force the thyroid to work, and that causes the thyroid gland to swell up and enlarge dramatically.
Another critical anterior pituitary product is growth hormone, or GH.
GH is fascinating because it has both tropic effects, like telling the liver to release something called insulin-like growth factors,
Right.
and direct non-tropic effects on tissues.
An abnormal production of GH creates some really extreme physical conditions.
It does. Think about Robert Wadlow, the tallest man ever recorded. His size, nearly 9 feet tall, was due to the hypersecretion of GH during childhood. We call that gigantism.
Which is different from hypersecretion that happens later in life, right?
Yes. If hypersecretion happens after your growth plates have fused in adulthood, it causes acromegaly. This only affects the bones of the face, hands, and feet, causing slow, distinctive physical changes over time.
Let's switch gears and look at how specialized glands handle rapid homeostatic challenges. Let's start with the two sets of hormones that manage your blood calcium levels.
Okay, the calcium police, they're operating constantly.
Right.
If your blood calcium gets low, 4 small parathyroid glands release parathyroid hormone, or PTH.
And PTH is the main player here.
It's the main player. It raises calcium by stimulating its release from bone, telling the kidneys to reabsorb it, and activating vitamin D to increase absorption from your food.
And the counter hormone to that is calcitonin.
Calcitonin is released by the thyroid gland when calcium is too high. It lowers levels by inhibiting bone breakdown. While it's important for childhood bone growth, PTH is really the primary short-term regulator in adults.
Now for what might be the most dramatic system, the adrenal glands and the stress response.
Right. They sit right on top of your kidneys, and they handle 2 very different types of stress.
The outside layer, the adrenal medulla, handles the acute stress.
Yes. The immediate threat, that sudden surge of exercise. It's controlled rapidly by nerve impulses from the hypothalamus, and it releases epinephrine and norepinephrine.
Adrenaline.
This is the famous fight-or-flight sequence. What are the immediate effects? Immediate fuel mobilization. Glycogen is broken down, heart rate increases, and crucially, a massive shunting of blood.
What do you mean by shunting?
Blood flow is diverted away from areas like your skin and your digestive tract, and it's slammed toward the brain and skeletal muscles where that immediate energy is desperately needed.
And here is where the chemical conversation gets so elegant. How does one molecule, epinephrine, tell the vessels in your gut to tighten up, but tell the vessels in your arm muscles to open up?
It's all about the receptor difference. In your intestinal blood vessels, epinephrine binds to an alpha-type receptor, which triggers constriction. But in your skeletal muscle vessels, it binds to a beta-type receptor, which triggers the vessel to dilate.
Same hormone, totally different instructions, just based on the receiving cell's chemical lock.
It's fantastic cellular choreography.
It really is. Meanwhile, the inner part, the adrenal cortex, handles chronic stress.
Yes, the long-term challenges like persistent low blood sugar or inflammation. And it's triggered by the tropic hormone ACTH.
And the cortex releases corticosteroids.
Right. The glucocorticoids, like cortisol, promote glucose synthesis from protein breakdown, and really importantly, they suppress the immune system.
Which is why they're used medicinally to treat chronic inflammation.
Exactly. And then the mineralocorticoids, like aldosterone, are focused on maintaining your crucial salt and water balance.
We have to quickly mention the sex hormones. The gonads, the testes, and ovaries are the major source, controlled by that same hypothalamic cascade we talked about.
Yes. Androgens, like testosterone, are responsible for male development in embryos, and then secondary characteristics at puberty.
And for females?
Estrogens, like estriadiol and progesterone, Estrogens maintain the female reproductive system, and progesterone is especially crucial for maintaining uterine tissue.
And of course, a quick nod to endocrine disruptors. These are foreign environmental chemicals like BPA that can mimic and interfere with our natural
A
hormones.
huge topic in its own right.
It is. So to finish our tour, let's look at the body's timekeeper, the pineal gland.
Which secretes melatonin at night.
Right.
It regulates our biological rhythms related to light and seasons. Melatonin release is controlled by the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN, that's our internal biological clock, and it is absolutely essential for promoting sleep.
Finally, let's touch on the incredible story of evolutionary repurposing. How the same hormone can perform wildly different jobs across species.
This really shows the efficiency of evolution. Thyroxine, for instance.
Yeah.
In most vertebrates, it regulates metabolism.
Standard job.
Standard job. But in the frog, it was specifically repurposed to stimulate the massive anatomical change of absorbing the tadpole's tail during metamorphosis.
And prolactin is another great one.
Fantastic example. In mammals, it stimulates milk production. But in fish, that exact same molecule regulates salt and water balance.
A totally different function.
Completely different. And perhaps the most medically relevant divergence involves MSH, melanocyte-stimulating hormone.
What does that do?
Well, while it controls skin color in reptiles, in mammals, MSH affects hunger and metabolism. And emerging research is showing that activation of these MSH pathways in the brain is strongly linked to the devastating muscle wasting disease called cachexia.
Wow. So the chemical mechanism for changing skin color has been repurposed to manage body mass.
It's just an incredible example of evolution tinkering with what it already has.
Wow. So we've navigated the whole system, from that initial molecule that makes an elephant seal roar, through these massive signal amplification cascades, and the complex regulation that allows one hormone to give different instructions to different cells.
It truly shows how chemical communication is just the ultimate adaptable foundation of life. And maybe that's the final provocative thought to leave with.
What's that?
A molecule as ancient and simple as prolactin is maintained across hundreds of millions of years, across fish and mammals, performing these complex, vital tasks of managing reproduction, hydration, and metabolism. That adaptability, that is the enduring power of the endocrine system.
An essential deep dive. We hope you feel thoroughly informed and maybe have a new appreciation for the silent conversation that's running your entire life.